Is this a paid for or a free platform? Because this is my second time being on it, like not with y'all, but with another organization, and it seems a little different, maybe a little better than Zoom and some of the other platforms that we find ourselves communicating with.
Yeah. So yeah, there's some really good functions on this. Hey everyone, see that we're live. Great to be here with you all again. I know. I think I took last week off, and I had one of my amazing colleagues, Christina. She was facilitating one of these conversations, but I'm back. Y'all got me again right before the election. We're gonna wait maybe another 20 seconds or so to let people trickle in. I know it's the lunchtime, so grab some food. And join us for this great conversation we're about to have, the last one before the election, to really highlight progress, not prison. So we'll give it a few more seconds, and then we'll get started with our awesome guests. Great. Let's get started, y'all. Be respectful of this lunch hour time. We'll see if we go an hour. The last couple conversations have been really great, and I'm looking forward to an awesome one today. I'm going to start how I'm supposed to start and do this right, because normally I just get going, and I'm so excited to talk with our guests that I forget to talk about progress, not prisons. But, if you've been following us or if you're new, you know that this is a public education campaign to highlight the $50 billion the state of California, the counties, and the cities in California spend on our broken criminal justice system, right? We are calling for progress, not prisons. And so since August, we've been highlighting what just 1% of the $50 billion spent every year could go and do in other sectors, right? Today, though, I'm really excited to really hone in on the criminal justice system with a good friend of mine, Esteban, who I've worked closely with on policy and justice reforms, and then a new friend, Tim, to hear about some of the organizing and great work that he is doing, his organization, LA Voice, in the LA area. So I'm Anthony Demartino. I'm the Government Affairs Director for Californians for Safety and Justice. Really proud and honored to be here with you all a week away from the end of voting and, probably the most important election of at least my lifetime. And, really hoping that folks have voted. If you haven't voted, you can still vote. If you're living in California, you should have gotten a ballot if you were registered to vote. I highly recommend that you go and drop that off. Don't mail it in. Don't take any chances. Go drop it off at a ballot center. Or you can wait to vote on next Tuesday in person. But you may be waiting in some long lines. So, please go and drop off your ballot. If you have not registered to vote, I think you can still conditionally register and conditionally vote the day of. So yeah, we'll have some more information at the end, but I really want to get started with this conversation, and I want to just jump right in and have our guests introduce themselves. So Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what do you do, what are you about, and what brought you to this work?
Okay, first I want to thank the CSJ family and Progress Not Prisons for the invitation to share my voice with your platform. My name is Tim Cornegay. I am the Justice Transformation Organizer at LA Voice, and LA Voice is a social justice organization in Los Angeles County that does its organizing from a faith perspective, which makes my seat unique at the table because I'm an individual who is a newly empowered voice, what some may call formerly incarcerated or justice system impacted, but I'm uncomfortable with both of those terms because neither instills a degree of power to individuals who, once they recognize the numbers that are involved in the carceral apparatus, will realize that we're stronger together than apart. My work with LA Voice since I've been there for 5 years has been focused on civic engagement, voter education, and voter registration for individuals who have had consequential contact with law enforcement. I find myself in that space because I am one of those individuals and had a realization of how important it is for those who have been impacted by a system that appears broken, but we also have the conversation and know that the system is not broken. It works exactly the way it's supposed to, and it's beholden upon us who are aware of that to share that information with our folks in a way that they can process it with their filters and to make real change. So thank you for having me, and I'm ready to get it done.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for joining us, making some time. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you so much for highlighting the importance of titles and how we talk about people and how we refer to people and, what's uplifting and what's not. I'm actually really interested to hear you talk a little bit more about that later. So appreciate that, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, Esteban, please, I could introduce you, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself today and, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what you're about, what brought you to this work.
Yeah, so thank you, Anthony. Always a pleasure to work alongside you, and of course, always a pleasure to be a part of CSJ's monumental movements. I think what you all are doing is extraordinary, and honored to be on here. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, an organization for and comprised of formerly incarcerated individuals. Sorry, Tim. But we work to end mass incarceration in California, also empowering our people to take part in advocacy work to try to change the system. We have a firm belief that those closest to the problem can help find solutions to correct those problems. For me, never thought I'd be in this work, to be completely honest. I know, Anthony, you've heard me say this before. I was studying to be a mechanical engineer when I came home. But it was really my experience of being incarcerated that I saw just the power of hope. I saw how important rehabilitative programming is, for everybody. And I saw the wonders that it does. I also just, having felt the feelings of being ostracized, when you come home, having to see the hardships and having to see just how the odds are always continuously stacked against you. Didn't sit well with me. And I actually met Scott Budnick, the founder, while I was incarcerated. This was around the time that Governor Schwarzenegger had pulled a bunch of the funding from rehabilitative programming. And Scott was instrumental in being able to reallocate some of the state dollars to bring back a lot of educational programs in institutions across California. So for me, I really got in this because I know people can change. I've changed myself. I also know that prison does you no favors in you trying to change. Like, it's incumbent upon a person to change themselves. And I know we can do so much better in California. And for the amount of money, you said at $50 billion that we're spending, it's just a fraction of that could just go such a long way in helping people develop themselves and giving people the necessary support and access to services that they really need, that a lot of people really need and just don't have the access to. So I'm really happy to be on here. I know we'll get more into it. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Esteban. Really appreciate that. Something you picked up on, and I want to come back to later, if you all allow me and if we have time. But something you just said around when you came home, you wanted to be a mechanical engineer, right? And I think about how oftentimes there's aspects of this work that I do love. I love actually like engaging with you all and talking with you folks like you and doing some of this work and seeing people get free. But I wish we didn't have to do this work, right? I wish that this wasn't like this. And the tweet that I have pinned on my Twitter is every day I'm working to put myself out of this job, right? That hopefully that like we don't have to do this work forever. Even though we know that this country was founded on the principles that have built the criminal justice system, like Tim said, that's not broken, that's working the way it is. But the question that I want to pose to you all for later, if we get there and we have time, is if you weren't doing this work, if you didn't have to fight social injustices, what would you be doing? Let's just leave some people with some hope at the end, right? I know a few different things that like I pursue in my free time when I have some free time, or things that I would do if I put myself out of this job. But let's table that and let's come back to that to kind of end with some hope and just some thinking of like reimagining, right? That's what this is really about, is reimagining, building a system that's healing for all, right? And that is not discriminatory and that is about justice. So let's get back to that at the end. thanks Esteban for, triggering that for me. And let's dive into the kind of the first question, right? So we talk a lot about here other issues and other sectors and the nexus between the criminal justice system and health and labor and education and faith and LGBTQ issues. I really want you all to talk a little bit though about the over-reliance on felonies, right? And the over-reliance on locking folks up disproportionately, especially, and how you all think that impacts and what's the impact on our collective public safety, right? So by utilizing felonies in prisons, what does that do to our communities, to our society? And Tim, you want to start?
Yeah, I believe that sometime in the 80s that there was a portion of our society that was dealing with the challenge of the economy not being what they wanted it to be, and the evolution of what they thought crime was as a result of the crack being infused into the Black and brown communities and those impoverished communities. And as they are so good at doing, those folks who sit in those back rooms and make plans figured out not only how to commodify our community in terms of extracting money out of it, but how to commodify our mistakes and the bad decisions that we would make choosing criminal options as a way to support ourselves. And once there was a realization that there was so much money to be spread about for those who would make a career, make a living off of engaging our misery, that they just started to fuel this amazing apparatus, and it became about numbers and job security for an element of the population that wasn't for us. And once the humanity portion of it disappeared, because there was no focus on, and forgive me for the term, of the zombies that were being created in our community as a result of crack and individuals self-medicating to deal with pain and struggles. Once that vision disappeared and the answer to public safety became, hey, in order for us to address this, we have to criminalize all of these things and put individuals behind the walls or bars, as folks would like to believe that prisons are, in order to make the community safe. And what they did was empty the community of a valuable resource that could have been infused with options, could have been rehabilitated, could have been looked at in a way of addressing trauma, like generational trauma, as opposed to just thinking that we're going to lock them up, figure out how that this is not a necessary drain on the economy, but it would uplift a portion of a population to invest in this animal that continued to arrest us at such an alarming rate. And we lost focus. The country lost focus, our communities lost focus, and it became an acceptable norm where some of us, myself included, figured entering into the system, into that incarceral apparatus, it was merely an occupational hazard. But we've chose this field of work, as some of us termed it, as our careers or whatever. And if we did wind up in jail, that's the consequence of living that life. But since there's no other choice, what else do we have? Not understanding that we were fuel for an apparatus that could only exist to the level that it did as long as we bit into a narrative that was the only option, and we didn't value ourselves as contributors to our community in the manner that we could have possibly been.
I'll just briefly touch on this. I think, what the whole theory of punishment will deter crime is falsified. If people are doing acts, I call them acts of desperation. Like you're stealing from a store, that's an act of desperation. You don't obviously are worried about if you're going to eat that night or if your family's going to eat that night. And what we've done as a society, and it goes back like to the Middle Ages, Didn't work then, doesn't work now. But this whole theory of like, we are going to increase the amount of punishments and it'll deter crime. I mean, I'll tell you, when I made the horrible decision that I did, the consequences weren't necessarily front and center for me. I was reacting. Really, what I was acting out on was a place of trauma. And I feel like as a society, instead of focusing on how we can correct and help uplift people, we focused on how can we continue to punish them. And punishment isn't necessarily a sense of accountability, to be clear. Like, I think they're two very different things. So you can take accountability without having to be punished per se, right? And I think, at least I can only speak for in California. I've seen just this whole, like, they're almost like just they go hand in hand in conversations. Like, well, let's be clear. Like, you can be punished for years and years and years and still not take accountability. So if the whole goal is for somebody to take accountability and to heal a community, slapping people with felony convictions isn't necessarily gonna help heal that person. It's not going to help with their underlying traumas. It's not going to help their families heal, because incarceration doesn't just affect the person that's incarcerated. It affects the entire community. I know, like in California, there's 4,800 restrictions for people who have past convictions. I mean, that's 1 in 10, or people coming home are 10 times more likely to be homeless. Like, we have to talk about the implications that it has. So this fuels a cycle of incarceration. So not only are we throwing people into this vicious cycle because we're trying to fearmonger or try to in a way think that it's going to deter crime, even though it doesn't. We're also doing them no favors when they're inside, because we're not really helping them heal. We're not helping them develop as human beings. And then when they come home, we just allow them to fall. And because we're not helping them have access to jobs, where in fact we're further barring them from having access to jobs. We're not helping them find housing. And then, there's a Brookings study. Brookings did a study. I want to say it was in 2007, and it said that of people coming home in the first year, only 55% have reported incomes. Of those people, of the 55% that have reported incomes, the median yearly salary for them was $10,000. $10,000. And so it's no question and I say acts of desperation, because if you're breaking in $10,000 a year, there's no way you can support yourself. There's no way you can support a family on that. So, I will say that felony convictions are, and of course in California, as it stands, we can't really get into it, but as it stands, if you come out and you're on state supervision, you can't vote. So not only are we not allowing them to take part in our democracy, we're not allowing them to get access to jobs, access to services, and we're not dealing with any underlying mental health conditions or traumas.
Wow. I mean, you all just touched on a whole lot of things. I think a connector that you both touched on, that I wanted to highlight, actually, that Tim definitely brought up for me really quick, was on this date in 1986, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 was signed by Reagan, and it created a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine possession, which contributed to mass incarcerations of African Americans, right? And I think, when I'm thinking about that, when Tim, you were bringing this up and you were talking about what was happening in the 80s, right? And then I'm thinking about hearing about Esteban talk about, the lack of ability to interact with your society, your lack of ability in most states to not be able to vote even after you've served your time, right? Like the accountability aspect, right? Like, when do we get to hold this system that has traumatized us and stolen resources, like Tim said? When do we get to hold them accountable, right? What does that look like, right? And I think that's what we're trying to talk about right now. We're not even talking about trying to hold these other systems accountable. We're just talking about, let's try to invest in some of other systems, right? And I think, Esteban, you highlighting the fact of accountability and punishment, right? And this whole idea of, well, when is when, right? And that's what time done is about, when is the time is actually done, right? And so, I'm curious, with both of you kind of, working in this space, having personal experiences, have you all ever felt like your time was done? Like, what is that? Like, if you have, what did that feel like? And if you haven't, what does that feel like?
For me, I gleaned the recognition that my time was done before I even got free. Once I realized what I had bought into, the system that I had bought into was running parallel to something that wanted me to believe the way I believe, wanted me to devalue myself as a human being, wanted me to surrender my humanity. And it was like, okay, I'm done with this in here. I'm no longer going to be a willing participant in a process that utilizes my behavior to influence other individuals like me. And there was an awareness, like how many of me's have I created by my demonstration, by my behavior. So in my heart, I felt free long before I walked out of prison, and I knew I had to be that way, because for some of us who have really like done time, there's a point when prison will get inside you, that you're physically in prison, and then prison will invade your soul and your spirit, and that's the only thing you think about is prison. And if you're not aware of how to process that out of you before you get out, you'll be free, but you'll still feel like you're in prison in your heart. So it was important to me to get rid of that prior to my getting free. And that was like 10 years, 12 years before I got free. So once I was free, the mission was, how do I share this evolution with others like me? And the realization that most of us was in some degree of prison before we even stepped inside anybody's box, before we even got handcuffs on us, because the moment we adopt these street names, then we create a prison. We can't talk to certain people. We can't go to certain places. Once we align ourselves with a certain color exclusively and refuse to participate with anybody that's of a different color, whether it's the color of your skin or whether it's the handkerchief you have in your back pocket, you are in prison. Once you start to feel comfortable inside the parks, the garages, the houses that we hang out in, you don't realize it, but you're becoming accustomed to being inside a box. So once you step inside what's officially considered to be prison, because you've trained your mind to operate in that environment, it's no big deal. It's just like, hey, I'm here. I've been doing this anyway. It's cool. So that time done process is spiritual and psychological first. And most of us should feel like, I'm done with it internally, and to project that externally to anybody that we come in contact with, and to adopt the responsibility and synchronize it with accountability, because we cannot ask anybody else to do or be what we aren't. So you have to hold ourselves responsible to be accountable to make the kind of change. We can't sit around any longer and let administrators and others decide what change looks like for us. And the moment we accept that responsibility, then that's when that time is done and a new time begins, because you start to step into change for folks like you.
So I'll touch on this, but I want to differentiate two things, because I know what Tim's talking about too. And I think that's the accountability piece. Like I had it when I was inside. It comes a time when you're just like, you're accepting of what happened, the consequences. You're accepting of the circumstances, and you start to do the work internally. But and I think it's incredible. One, like what Tim says, like, it's incredible to do in such a strenuous environment that like does nothing but instill trepidation within you. But to be able to focus and hone in and do the introspective work, it does begin to feel, you begin to feel free of that. But I will say, like, in terms of carrying the shame, in terms of the barriers that we like are confronted with on a daily basis, it never stops, right? Like I'll even take it for the protests. Like I couldn't go out there in March. I have 3 strikes. And so for me, it's like it never stops. It doesn't stop. Like my ability to advocate in the Capitol was restrained because of COVID. My ability to partake in peaceful demonstrations was restrained because of my conviction. And so I think, people always, and I've heard people say, well, you came home, don't you feel guilty? And it's like, well, I mean, I'll carry this for the rest of my life. It's not something that goes away. It's something that I will carry in my heart for the rest of my life. Like, the society doesn't need to continuously shame us or kick us while we're down. Like, it's like we've taken ownership of it. And like we're moving forward in life with it. And a reflection of how serious we've taken ownership of it is how we've changed our behaviors. It's what we do now. Like, look at what Tim does with his life now. Me with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, what we do. I mean, that just goes to show that the accountability has been there, yet we still continue to face barrier after barrier after barrier. And it's something that I think, that I have a hard time believing that we'll ever stop doing the time, like, yeah, in the physical form, yes, like I found peace in prison, which is ironic to say, but found peace in prison in my heart, in my soul, but it just doesn't ever stop. Like, there are always times, like, I always feel like that shoe's going to drop, something's going to happen. I'm going to get blasted on something. I used to think when I first came home, like, I'd go into a grocery store, go into a restaurant and be like, oh shit, everybody knows I did time, and not that everybody does, but it just goes to show, like, mentally, it takes a toll. It's taxing, it's very taxing. And we are still confronted with barriers. I mean, the people who can't partake in this, arguably the most important election, they're still facing the hardships of their past. And it's not a direct reflection of who they are today. And I think that's the piece that we as a society have to come to terms with. It's like, there's a difference between holding somebody accountable, but then seeing and recognizing somebody's growth and maturity.
Can I interject just like?
Of course. Go ahead, Tim.
Like, just to touch on what Esteban said, like, a lot of folks have that internal stigma. Like, everybody knows I've been to prison because we've been trained to feel like that, instead of feeling like going to prison is a platform that you can stand on and say, just because you attempted to use this as an anchor, guess what? I'm going to step on top of it and use it as a platform to speak to the fact that I've learned from this and know what this is about, and nothing you can do at this point could hold me back, because you had my body, but now I have this newly empowered voice, and I'm going to share it with individuals and let them know this is not for us. This is something that was handed to us, and though we've accepted the stigma of it, to stop doing that and start to feel like I'm better for it, and that feeling like everybody knows that I've been to prison. For a little bit, I felt like that. And then I feel like when I walk in the room, when I start talking, everybody knows that I've been to prison. And I feel like it's intimidating, because they don't understand, like, how can somebody that has been and lived that particular life can articulate and express a point and convince individuals and organize individuals to the degree that I've been able to make the kind of stuff that I've been able to make happen with teams of individuals just like me. So it's a point of, like, you have to respect the press, because it's not what you want it to be. It's what I need it to be. It's what folks who believe in this time done energy, this attacking these collateral consequences, because the collateral consequences is a conversation that I've been having with Jay Jordan for 5 years. Like, we look at stuff, but we never address, like, the shadow circumstances that hold us back, that we know that there are things that we can't do, but we didn't understand how those things that got in place and how we can take a collective voice and address that in a manner to say, hey, we're no longer willing to accept this, and we have the numbers to do it. So I don't think we should feel stigmatized. I think we should feel powerful and to use our numbers to leverage the kind of change we need in order to survive in the world that we live in.
Yeah, I think you both, Well, thank you both for those responses. Really powerful. I think you both touch on things that I think about a lot. Like there's the personal work, right? The internal work, and then there's the societal work that you all are doing, that we're all trying to do, right? And stigmatization, right, can play a role if internally, right, and personally, we are in our heads, right, and we haven't done some of that personal reflection work, right? We haven't seen a therapist, we haven't talked with our families, we haven't talked with our communities about what we're feeling. But the other side of it, right, is when society continues to stigmatize you, right? And that has those collateral consequences that you're both talking about, right? That's another form of prison when you all come out, because like it said, it's barring y'all from having certain jobs. It's barring y'all from where you could potentially live, right? It's barring y'all from getting loans to take care of your families, educational opportunities. California just banned the box on higher ed in California, so what, we've had the UC systems for 50, 60 years, and we're just now doing that, right? So I that's what I'm thinking about, is like there's that internal thing, right? Like I've never been to prison, but the stigma that I struggled with at times was, I used to wear my hair like bald. Like I used to be like super short, and people would assume I was a gang member. If you didn't grow up with me, you didn't know me, and you were meeting me when I was, in my early 20s, living in LA or in the Inland Empire, or even in my mid to late 20s, like I had short hair, and a lot of folks were like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, no, that's not me, but like that was the stigma that I would carry at times, because people just thought I looked like that, which then goes to the disproportionality of the system that's been that was built to criminalize us, right? Mm-hmm. And to put us in these prisons and put us in these boxes. So, I think that there's a lot of connections with what y'all are talking about, the internal and then the societal work that we're trying to undo. And, big props to both of y'all for the personal and internal work that y'all do, because you're getting yourselves free, and then now you're doing the work to get others free. So, appreciate that. I think that leads me to kind of the segue of like, let's talk solutions a little bit, right? Let's talk about this progress that y'all have made, y'all are making personally and professionally, and for our communities. So I really would like to hear you both talk, and maybe let's start with Esteban on this one. For individuals and families who have been impacted by the criminal justice system, right? And when I say that, right, I emphasize individuals and families. I think it was you, Esteban, that talked about, it's not just the individual that does the time, right? It's the entire community. It's oftentimes most of these crimes are committed within a community, so the a victim and the perpetrator know each other too. And so I'm curious, what are some of these priorities when it comes to bringing progress? How do you all know that you're seeing progress, that you're seeing some successes? And I'll start with you, Esteban.
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying I think it's important to always have a healthy support system, right? I came home to a healthy support system. I left my younger brother when I went inside, and I promised him I would stay with him until he graduated high school. And it's helped me at least right my wrongs, so to speak, right? Which has given me, I think, the power and endurance to continue down the path of reforms. I think, for people who have been directly and indirectly impacted by the justice system, it's important that we educate the people around us. We have to change the narrative. And it talks to, what we were just talking about is stigmatization, right? And I think how society views us and how we view ourselves are two very different things. And I think, we have to continue to educate. We have to be okay having those tough conversations and talking about, the experiences, not just from, individuals like Tim and myself, but also from, like my younger brother being able to talk about it with individuals, with his classmates, right? Because one of the things I felt really guilty for inside is like, my sister struggles with mental health illness, and my brother is 11 years younger, going to school every day, and people ask, where's your brother? Oh, he's in prison. And where's your sister? Oh, she's in the hospital for an attempted suicide. And here's a kid who easily could have embarked on like the same cycles that his two older siblings laid before him, but instead chose to go a different direction with it. But I think it speaks to just how it had he and he has like talked about his experience as a brother whose older brother was incarcerated. It's helped the people around him, his own community of friends and networks and stuff, look at the incarceration system very differently, right? And that speaks to like how we change the narrative, how we shifted away from one that stigmatizes and ostracizes people who have been incarcerated into one that is more at least open-minded, and wanting to understand. With all the elections and the ballot initiatives going on, I'll say one of the positives I see about it is it has allowed us an opportunity to have some of those conversations, to talk about, why do we need more rehabilitative programming inside prisons? Why do we need people who are formerly incarcerated to be able to engage civically, to be able to have a say-so in their communities? I think, the most important thing we do is change the narrative. And I think we're doing that, today by doing things such as this. There was 20, when the fires broke, there was 20 ARC members, all formerly incarcerated, none of which could vote, by the way. We're all out there fighting fires, helping to protect our communities, and having those conversations like, look, these are people who are fighting to protect, communities up and down California who have no stake in the community, no say-so in the community. And I think talking about that, but also talking about just, what it means emotionally and what it has felt like emotionally for families to, what changed me, I'll say, when I was in prison, my mother came to visit me for the first time. I was in solitary, had lost 30 pounds. I will never forget the look on her face as she trembled, putting her hand up to the glass. And it was that moment that I realized, like, I'm not the only one in prison. My mother's here too. My father's here too. My younger brother's here too. And in a way, I feel like they suffered more than I did, because, I knew I was safe. Like, when I didn't call my mother, she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know why I didn't call. She didn't know why we were on lockdown. She didn't know if I was, it had anything to do with me. And I think, that, for me is it's important to talk about, because it's true. It's like, not only are we having to adhere to the punishment, but also our families, they suffer as well, So I would say, having those continued conversations, being able to talk to community members, challenging people on their stance, and humanizing, this issue is the most important things that we can all do.
Great. Before you go, Tim, we just want to share with y'all, thank you again for being here on our conversation, Progress Not Prisons. Really excited about this conversation, have really enjoyed it so far. For those of you that are tuning in, you can submit questions. We'd love to have questions from you all. We got about 20 minutes left in this conversation, so feel free to submit some questions. But yeah, Tim, talk to me a little bit about what are priorities, what are resources that you feel the communities you advocate for really could use and need if we're looking at reallocating funding from this criminal justice system.
I think that's something Esteban said is really important, and I have to tap into it, and that's the restoration of humanity. To help individuals feel that sense of humanness, that they belong, and not that they're ostracized, not that they're other, not that they're not wanted. It's just that we all belong and have an interest in designing the communities that we live in, and it is critically important. And then there's to instill in folks that there's hope, that change is not an abstract. Change is something that we can all engage in, and it's never too late to change until it's too late to change. So you can always reinvent yourself, and for folks to feel like they can do it in terms of like the resources that is necessary, especially in this climate that we're in now. I like to share with folks that you are on this ballot. Your life is found somewhere in these resources that are going to be created. And these are just new resources, but there always have been some degree of resource. It's just being in the lane where there's an information stream that points you in the right direction. Because as we all know, you can't do more than what you know. You can't access any more than what you know is accessible. So sharing information with individuals and helping them like achieve those first steps forward and see the reality of what could happen, because a lot of our folks don't believe that certain things exist. Most of our folks, when LA County was talking about building 2 new county jails, and there was this big coalition effort to stop that from happening, most of the individuals who would have found themselves in one of those cages, had they been built, had no idea that that conversation was taking place. The fact that there was an enormous savings associated with that change in direction, folks who aren't involved in the work have no idea that that was taking place. But in the big picture, the fact that there were a number of individuals who have spent some degree of time in somebody's custody were the voices of, and powerful voices in those spaces, saying that we don't need this. We don't need further incarceral methods and models to put our folks in prison. We need this money. We need these resources to be directed towards community-based programming. And on some level, there's this great awareness now that law enforcement and the carceral apparatus is not the answer to public safety. We are, all of us, whether you've been incarcerated or never been incarcerated, we are the answer to our public safety. It's just unfortunate at this moment for individuals who come from those communities that I label the 3 Bs, whether you black, brown, or broke. Safety for us has become a luxury. We have to move us like beyond that space into the space that our communication, our designing of programming, our designing of all of the resources that are heading that way, that we are at the table saying this is how those resources would best work for the communities that we come from, and to stop letting folks who haven't been in those communities in a long time and who maybe have never been in those communities to design these programs that are cookie cutter that we all know don't work for us. And lastly, I'll borrow again once again, because he's so good at articulating his point. Closest to the problem, closest to the solution. We may not have all the answers, but we've definitely made all the mistakes. So we know what not to do. And that gives us an advantage over most.
And I want to just touch on something too, that, humanizing this issue doesn't cost anything. Going and meeting a kid in the juvenile hall is free. Going and meeting somebody who's gone through the system is free. And I think, if we change our outlook and started treating people with dignity and respect, even while they're incarcerated, I would say we would see it would be such a exponential investment. We'd see a grave return on our investment. I think, oftentimes, like, we are asking people to climb mountains, while being treated and dragged through the mud. And I think we have to treat people like human beings. At the end of the day, we're still human beings. A decision does not reflect who a person is as an individual. I made a horrible decision, but I'm not a horrible human being. And at the end of the day, all I wanted was to be treated like a human being. And I think we have to, if we had, 10% of what we spend on corrections, and we were really able to reimagine what our criminal justice system looked like, one where there was accountability, but also one where we did invest in the people that are incarcerated, and invest in preventative work. I mean, like I said before, for me, what drove me to incarceration was I had a childhood trauma that I never dealt with, and it wasn't until I was inside that it dawned on me that, like, it had such a heavy influence over my actions. I used to always wonder, like, why do I go to these extremes to defend myself? Why is it so important to me? And when I was inside, I realized it's important to me because when I was a child, I didn't defend myself. And so I've gone to this extreme to prove to myself that I'm worthy of defending myself. And I think, what we have to do as a society is invest in our youth, and ensure that they have the education necessary to deal with the traumas, but also access to the care, to quality care, not just, care where people stand in a line and you get seen and you get a check and you move on kind of thing. I mean, quality care where people are able to really express themselves and really understand like the nuances of trauma and the nuances of and dynamics of their family. And because like there's generational trauma and it exists today. And I think we haven't done enough to focus in and deteriorate those cycles.
There was a question that popped up, the advocacy for the prison, those sentencing enhancements and the change that's necessary. But folks should understand that those enhancements are the result of legislators feeling like punishing us to a higher degree would keep us from engaging in criminal acts and activities. When in fact, that portion of the population that believed in that and helped those sentencing enhancements become part of California law are not folks that come from those communities that we belong to. So in order to get those changes, after November 3rd, we have to start sitting down in coalition and coming up with a plan that we can share with those lawmakers to let them know that this is not what we want. This is not ever what we wanted. And these things need to be changed because they are more harmful to our community than they were ever helpful. And all they do is cause billions and billions of dollars of expenditures that could be invested in the community. And it's cheaper to help educate a person, to give a person a skill, to step them in a career than to put a person inside a cage.
Trying to find my unmute button. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Tim. I think, tying into a little bit what Esteban was talking about too around the ballot, and we're all, and Tim, you said this too, we're all on the ballot, right? A lot of those sentencing enhancements were passed through propositions and initiatives, right? And legislators played a part in that. Past governors played a part in that, but we as an electorate played a part in that, Mm-hmm. And who gets to be a part of the electorate, right? Who do they want to be a part of the electorate? Those are questions that we all got to be asking ourselves. But I think you're right around coalition building. I think Esteban's right around humanizing and talking about who these folks are, who we are. And then, I think at the end of the day, it's being aware of what you're voting for, what's on the ballot, right? And is that for progress or is it for prisons, right? That's how you got to be thinking about it. That's really what it's about right now. I agree with both of you. Be aware of who and what's on the ballot, and does it reflect your values? Does it reflect the values you want to see? And get activated, right? Let's work together in coalition. The 3 B's, as Tim said. I'm gonna be using that, Tim, and work together because together we're stronger, right?
Yes,
we're stronger. We're getting towards the end. I want to revisit that first question, if that's okay with y'all. Do y'all remember that first question? Sorry, y'all. My puppy's getting some water. I got 2 husky puppies here with me right now outside. But the first question, right? If you weren't doing this work, if you didn't have to do this work, what would you be doing right now? Work-wise, enjoyment-wise, job-wise, career-wise? Who wants to start?
I'll go. If I had my druthers and I could be doing what I wanted to do, my first love is words. So I think that when you're able to take words and create pictures and energies, that you have the power to change folks' lives in a manner that's immeasurable. So if I had my choice, I'd be a writer.
I love it. And let me ask you, Tim, do you write now?
Yes.
It's beautiful. So you're able to do that too. I love it. Esteban, what about yourself?
It's funny that Tim said that. I'd probably do one or two things. I'd be a creative writer. I used to love doing creative writing. I haven't done it in a long time, just because it's so much different than policy writing. Or I would be a mechanical engineer. I used to actually, my hustle at an early age was building computers. I'd build them and I'd flip them. And I used to make really good money on it when I was a kid back then. I just found, I've always found such enjoyment just out of building things, watching it work, taking things apart, learning how they work. And so I would imagine that I would do one of those two things.
Tim, you hop in. You got something else?
They're like with the evidence that's writing is important. We can look at like media and movies and books that were written in an era and see how they influence our communities. And one day you saw it on a screen, the next day you saw individuals emulating the same behavior. So, I think that's important. Somebody asked, what's the name of the book? When I was in prison, because I didn't want to engage in the illicit behavior in prison and hustling, I wrote a book called The Price of Justice, which was like urban fiction, pretty good urban fiction. And it helped support me for a couple of years while I was trying to figure it out. So that's the answer, the Live Free ICUC question.
That's amazing, Tim. Love it. Really appreciate it. And, I asked this question for, a couple different reasons, but I'm sorry, I got the Mike Pence fly right now. But I asked this question because, what really brought me to this work was I started volunteering at a juvenile hall when I was 20 years old, Esteban, to your point around volunteering. And I was already mentoring kids that were, that were outside, that they weren't locked up. Some of them had some experience, but this was my first time really working with kids that were locked up. And it really changed my perspective from this idea that kids were good and bad, that the situation was black or white, and really made me think about environment. But it also humanized just people in general that had maybe committed a crime or maybe not, right? But were locked up. And that these kids had dreams, or they weren't afforded dreams because of the environment that they were born into, right? And going back to something Tim was talking about earlier around prisons that we put ourselves into before we even get locked up, I would take it another step further, right? Those prisons were created because society created those or lack of opportunities, right, for gangs to be birthed, right? When you look at the rise of certain gangs, right, urban gangs, right, we know oftentimes white gangs came before them, but they weren't criminalized the same way, right? And so I think about this question all the time, because how many dreams were killed or never even allowed to be birthed because of a criminal justice system that sucks up all the resources in a community that should be invested in. And how many musicians, how many writers, how many human beings did we throw away and are throwing away, even when they come back, because we're setting up to fail, right? So that's why I wanted to ask that question. I wanted to hear, and I want folks to hear from you all. Y'all have dreams. Y'all aren't just the fact that you were incarcerated, right? Like Tim said at the beginning, like that's a part of your history. And there's a whole other human part of you, right, that we don't always get to see and we don't always get to highlight, especially when we do these talks, because so much of these talks are about your experience and your expertise. But there's other aspects to both of you. Tim, I don't know you that well. Esteban, I'm getting to know you. But I know that there's other aspects to you, just like anyone else that I meet on the street. There's a whole lot of aspects to them, right? So I just wanted to highlight that, and thank you both. Tim, do you have something else you want to say? I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you said something that's critically important when you talk about the how dreams are killed. All of us should be mindful, even though we're unaware when we doing it, that the one thing that's most responsible for killing dreams is you can't. That whenever we hear ourselves saying you can't, then know that those could be the few words that change the directory of a person's life. So consider, when that's forming in your head, what else can you say to help that person live into, or at least have the conversation before you pull out the dream killer and say you can't.
Yeah, Tim. I mean, to me, as soon as you said that, it's just like especially Esteban talking and being vulnerable about, childhood trauma, right? Like how quickly a thing that you could say to a child, to a human being, to an adult, will stick with you, right? We remember those negative things more than the positive. And then lastly, when you say you can't, right, collateral consequences are a you can't, right? That's what they are. Like you are telling people like, yeah, you did your time, you spent some time in probably horrible conditions in prison and you got off probation or parole, but you still can't. You still can't, right? And that takes a toll. And to fact that you all have rised up and you're trying to get other people to be able to say you can, I applaud you all. And I like, as I always kind of end with this, I'm proud to be in this fight with y'all. And like I said, every day we're working to put ourselves out of a job, and so that we don't have to fight this and we can go be writers. I'd be a personal trainer or maybe a DJ. I love music and I love controlling the music in a room. As you can tell, I'm facilitating a combo, right? I like to feel out the space and put up.
I'm gonna need a link to a playlist.
Follow me on Spotify, follow me on Instagram. But I appreciate both of y'all. Tim, you got anything else you want to say?
I just want to say, thanks for the opportunity, for welcoming me to the platform. Anytime I get a chance to share, I'm there. And I know individuals need to hear it, and there needs to be more folks like us who believe in this push, who have this energy and this passion for change, because if not us, then who? And at this point, we got.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Tim. I do this work because I want the folks that haven't been impacted like you all to care too. Because I do think once we all care, then it's all we'll find the solutions together, right? And so that's my charge is to continue to bring other folks into the fold and humanize this and show like you could be like how I was when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and think there was good and bad, and you were either good or bad. And you can still change. Like you said, Tim, like you can change until you can't. And so you can still change. And that's what I'm hopeful about with this election is I've seen a lot of folks start to change and ask questions and think critically. And so with that, I want to thank you both again. A reminder to everyone, we encourage you to sign the pledge to vote. So voting for measures that support our community investments over increase in prison spending, right? You can go to Progress Not Prisons to do that. If you prefer our materials in Spanish, you can also visit progresosprisionosno.com. It's not too late to vote. It's never too late to get engaged. Last thing, my father just started voting as a 60-year-old man a couple elections ago, and now he's more engaged sometimes than I am. So it's never too late to change and be involved. Your vote matters. It really does. And if it didn't, they wouldn't be trying so hard to take it away from y'all, right? They tell a lot of folks you can't, or they try to. So if you can, please do it. Thank you as always. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. And I hope y'all be safe. And we'll talk to y'all probably after the election. And last things last, Black Lives Matter, y'all.
That's right.